You're listening to episode 70 of the Style and Stewardship podcast. On this episode, I wanted to just share something that many of us are not even thinking about. And if you've listened to some of the episodes before, like the one that I did on hydration and just speaking about type 2 diabetes that runs in my family, and that's something that I'm trying to actively and practically avoid through different dietary approaches and really paying attention to what my body is telling me about the things that I'm eating. I encouraged you on the last episode 69, that is one of the main components that many people are missing. They're following all these different diets which I think there's nothing wrong trying on different diets for size to see how your body responds to certain things within reason, but we're not listening to what our body is, how our body is responding to the things that we're taking in. And if we're just focused so much on, certain barometers like weight loss or, hitting a certain amount of macros or, only eating this amount after a certain time period and all these wacky things that people have done over the years. And I'm not saying that some of those things don't work for them, but I always want to bring you back to this idea and this concept of stewarding your wellness well. And the best way to do that is by listening to your body, eating food in the most whole state that you possibly can, eating way less processed and ultra processed food-like substances, things that are, man-made, a lot of, things that your body doesn't need, can't process well. And some of the things honestly haven't even been around long enough for scientists to even give us a definitive answer on whether or not certain things cause this issue or that issue. The big ones that we know of, such as cancers and so many other, just health issues that like you, I'm sure, do not want to experience if we can possibly help it. Here's the thing. If we are not listening to what our bodies are telling us in response to what we're eating, how we're living our lives, and our lifestyles in general, we are going to miss the boat on what actually works for us, what makes us healthy, what makes us feel well. I'm always encouraging you to be your own health advocate, and you can't do that without listening to what your body's saying, comparing how you feel before you started eating a certain way and then afterwards, and just tweaking things along the way. None of this is about perfection. It is about you living as well as you possibly can. And this episode is talking about something that a lot of us just pay no attention to. I don't know if you're anything like me where you're like, why didn't I learn this in school? I feel like this is really important. When we were in PE and we were running around, we were getting a little exercise. That's cool. That's awesome. We learned how to do teamwork and whatnot and expend a little bit of energy. However, we didn't really learn about what our body is doing with the food that it's taking in, other than something that was handed down to us telling us we should eat this many of this and this many of that. And some of it was from a good place of, trying to make sure that we got the energy that we needed from the foods that we were eating. But a lot of things we missed the mark, and there's so much new science about our gut health, about how it influences so many different things in our bodies and even in our hormones, in our brain. There's so much stuff to get into, but we're not going to get into gut health on this particular episode. We're going to talk about something that comes a little bit before that. And let's just hop into the episode. You're listening to the Style and Stewardship podcast. So what is stewardship? That is exactly what we'll be talking about in each and every episode of this podcast. As Christ followers, I think it's so important that we manage every single area of our lives to the best of our ability. Not perfectly, but intentionally in our own unique way, and holding on to God's grace every single step of our journey. On this podcast, I'll be sharing thoughts, things that God's teaching me, and transparent talks. My hope is that when you listen, you'll feel equipped, you'll be encouraged, And more than anything, I hope that you're inspired to live out your day-to-day calling in your own unique way. This podcast is for the woman who wants to hear, "Well done." Before we get into this episode, I definitely want to just go ahead and do a medical disclaimer. Nothing that I share on this podcast or on this particular episode is to treat, cure, or diagnose any medical condition. Please take all of those concerns that you may have to your doctor. I am not an expert. I am not a doctor. I am just someone who is sharing things for informational purposes only. So please consult your doctor. When we sit down to eat something, or we wake up and we have something to eat, what may not occur to many of us is everything that we're taking in is supposed to give our body something that it needs. Minerals, phytonutrients, fiber, fat, protein, carbohydrates. And one of the things that many of us may not be thinking about is our body's need for energy. A lot of times it's like we eat or we do things based on what we feel like eating or what we want to have. Or sometimes we are so fixed in these boxes of I have a green shake in the morning, or I do intermittent fasting, or I don't have carbs after 6 p.m. Or we have all of these thoughts and all of these things that we have picked up many times through marketing, through different people that we follow, and we start developing a perspective and a perception about what it means to be healthy, regardless of what our body is giving us this feedback about and telling us is actually healthy and making us feel good and making us feel vibrant and actually giving us energy. So what is it, right? What is it that we need to do, every single last one of us, every day? Unless you are fasting, for spiritual reasons, for different breakthroughs, to hear from God, to get closer to God, to quote unquote sorrow your soul because you are trying to just get to a different place spiritually, as you are trying to just really hear from God and block out, some of the physical things, putting down the physical person so that you can, really, you get what I'm saying. If you've ever fasted, we fast for, spiritual reasons. We give up things for a season sometimes so that we can basically sacrifice doing this thing and getting closer to God. So unless you are fasting for spiritual reasons, a lot of people will do something called intermittent fasting. And I've probably spoken about this on the podcast before, but I'm getting to a point. So intermittent fasting is when, some people do different splits. So it can be like 16-8. Regardless, you're not eating for a certain window of time and you're getting all of your calories within a specific time frame that you've deemed your fasting window. Some people don't eat after 5 so they can, have their first meal at a certain time and stop eating at a certain time, and it's a whole thing. Many people are doing this so that they can restrict calories, so that they can lose weight. Some people say that they feel better when they do this. There are many things that we can do that will, quote unquote, make us feel better until they don't. Because sustainability is a real thing. Your body's hormones are a very real thing. And when we start manipulating our body out of using the things that it knows to use, that God created it to use, outside of any medical concerns, for example, keto, the ketogenic diet was used for people that had seizures, and they ate a very specific way for their specific condition. Many people now are picking up a lot of these things that have made it into popular wellness culture, that have gotten people certain results for a time. But the fact of the matter is the body is extremely complex, and it's also extremely smart. God has created, like, inside of our bodies, we have all of these cells and all this cellular activity, and it is doing so many things that scientists, no matter how long we live, will never truly be able to understand things completely, because I truly believe that even our ability to understand how the body works is a gift from God, so that, doctors can come in and help things, so that someone can literally have something happen to their body, and surgeons they know the body's structure and anatomy and physiology so well that they can put things back together, so to speak. Here's the thing. When we are in this place of trying to manipulate things just for the sake of manipulating them so we can get a certain result, regardless of the health of our bodies, we start making we start making mistakes in our eating and the way that our body will actually perform for us, because we start creating unnecessary hindrances. Truly unnecessary, because we've heard of this new thing. Here's what I would love to say to you, and I've been down a long path. You can listen to the episode that I did about, being vegan for a couple of years and how that really set my health and wellness back, and all of these different things. I touched on the fact that, I went to a dermatologist and I was trying to get to the bottom of a mark, and he told me, you have some autoimmune thing going on. So you have inflammation going on, which I've touched on, I believe it was episode 68 and 67, I believe, on inflammation. So trust me, I am right there with you. I am not perfect in any of these things, and I am a lifetime learner, especially when it comes to growing in my faith, and when it comes to growing in my wellness, and trying to understand and practically apply a lot of the things that I'm learning through the eyes of God made things that can heal our bodies, can help our bodies. And am I helping my body do what God has created it to do, based on the things that I'm taking in, based on the things that I can control? And one of the most powerful things that I believe all of us can do is to learn more about the human body and how it works. Learn how our particular bodies work, knowing our bodies so well that when things are off and things are awry, we can pinpoint, hey, I started feeling bad when I stopped eating this, or when I started eating that. And that is what I want to encourage you to do. So today I wanted to talk about blood sugar regulation. And as someone who tries to avoid, type 2 diabetes, and someone who has learned over the years that there are certain things that I am more susceptible to than the next person if they don't have type 2 diabetes in their family, if they don't have obesity in their family, if they don't have heart disease in their family, which all of those things run in my family. There are things, I've said this before, your heredity and the different genetics that run in your family are not a guarantee that, it's not your destiny that you're going to get type 2 diabetes if your mom has it, or, if your sister has it. I'm literally speaking from experience. Your grandmother has it, your uncles have it, all of those things. If you are not eating and doing things the way that they are doing them. One of the things that, as in, trying to learn about how to avoid type 2 diabetes and trying all the different things. I have tried the intermittent fasting. I have tried keto. I have tried all of the things in order to feel like I have some sort of, just kind of getting in front of certain things. And I was doing them for health reasons. I cut out, all these things, trying to find the quote unquote perfect diet, perfect template that other people tried on for size, that other people said worked for them. I've tried those things, which is why I started in the intro about that very thing. I have tried these different things. You have probably tried different things. And sometimes it takes getting a health diagnosis to really take things seriously. Sometimes it takes having some sort of warning sign that your body's sending you through symptoms, whether that be, the way that you eat or sleep, your brain fog, your jitteriness, your anxiety, all of these different things. we can make one of the biggest impacts on our health by what we are taking in. It is one of the things that we do more than anything else that will affect our health, what we are putting in and on our bodies, the environment that we're living in. Sometimes we can't control that. There's all types of things going on outside in our environment, but what's going on with the things that we're putting in? So keep all of those things in mind as I speak, because I'll kind of refer back to them because it just makes sense with what we're talking about. So first, let's start with how the body uses energy, where the body gets energy from. And I think that it's really important to talk about the fact that our body gets energy, our body's preferred and main energy source is from glucose. So as we are taking in our macronutrients, which will be your fat, your carbohydrates, and your proteins, when we're taking in macronutrients, the body prefers to use glucose. The body obtains glucose by breaking down the carbohydrates into a sugar called glucose. And this is what our body uses to run off of. This is literally fuel in the system. This is gas in the tank. When we are eating and skipping meals and doing all these other things, our body will begin to try to use stored glucose. Our muscles actually store glucose in the form of glycogen. So it's the reason why if you're an athlete, you'll start burning, you can kind of imagine you're burning backup fuel. And this is necessary. We need that. The body stores a certain amount of quote unquote energy to be used for times to regulate our blood sugar when we're sleeping. For example, because we're not eating every couple of hours while we're sleeping, the body is still trying to maintain this blood sugar balance and regulation. People that have blood sugar management issues are people that have type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And there's also something called insulin resistance, which I've been reading a heck of a lot about lately. And I'm going to do an entire episode on that because it affects every single last one of us. So this is why, regardless of what you may be experiencing in your health and in your wellness, this is something that affects every single last one of us, because every single last one of us that has a body, the body is going to be using carbohydrates broken down into this form of energy called glucose. So as we're to say I eat a meal, I wake up in the morning, I eat a meal, I drink some water, I have my coffee, and I do it kind of in that order. You're giving your body fuel to work off of for the day. So your body uses a hormone that is excreted from the pancreas called insulin. And insulin literally tells the body, it keeps the body's blood glucose levels in balance. And I'm just going to read to you from, I'll put the source down in the description, but I'm going to read to you what it says. And this is from the ncbi.nlm.nih.gov. And that's where you can pull up a lot of information about medical journals and all of those good things. So I'm going to read what it says. Insulin is a peptide hormone secreted by the B cells of the pancreatic islets of Langerhans and maintains normal blood glucose levels by facilitating cellular glucose uptake, regulating carbohydrate, lipid, and protein metabolism, and promoting cell division and growth through its mitogenic effects. Okay, so when you hear the word lipid, just think fat. And when you hear, metabolism, that is literally our body using everything that we've placed in it for energy and to do all of the body's functions. We'll talk about metabolism on a whole other episode too. So just to give you an overview of what insulin is. Insulin is literally trying to keep things steady. When we are doing something like using a glucometer, and I spoke about that on that same hydration episode, because I thought I was having, signs of diabetes, pre-diabetes. And I bought that glucometer because I needed to check myself what was going on in my body. Why was I having frequent output? Why was I feeling the way that I was doing and run down and all of those things? And I'm just really one of those people that I like answers. I like to know why. I've said that before, and I'm always encouraging you to know your body so you can figure out, okay, that something's not right. So at least when you go to the doctor, you're armed with what your normal is. As I'm using this glucometer, what I was doing was, what do you check with that? You check your blood glucose level. You're checking how much sugar is in your blood. When people say sugar in your blood, I know old timers say, I've got sugar, and that's them saying, I've got a problem with diabetes. And when it comes to pricking your finger and going and getting all of those counts done, I encourage everybody to know those numbers. And you can do that, with a wellness check every year, and getting certain things, getting that blood draw and getting the urinalysis and all of those things, so that you know how much cholesterol is going on in your body, what your LDL, your HDL, your VLDL, all of those numbers, your glucose, knowing where you stand so you have a baseline. So if things are not where they should be, you have a marker to say, this is my normal and this is not. You can do that with how you feel, but it's also important to have those data points so you can have that black and white. Okay, these are where my numbers were last year. This is where we are 6 months or a year from now. And you want to make sure that you're staying in healthy ranges, not just healthy ranges, really, you want to stay in optimal ranges. You don't want to be 0.5% away from, anyways. So checking your blood glucose, this is literally, you do this fasted. So you wake up in the morning and you prick your finger, you get that reading, and it's supposed to be under 100, I think it's milliliters, if I'm not mistaken. I forget what the breakdown is. So it tells you, though, mine is digital. I think all of them are digital at this point. And you get that number, and it gives you a window in time of how your body is doing. And then you can do that I did it for several weeks so that I could see what my normal was and to make sure that I was in a good range. How our body processes the food that it takes in is key. So when we're talking about insulin, your body has to use this hormone to regulate your blood sugar. So say I wake up and my body needs fuel. I've been asleep. It needs to be hydrated. And the first thing that I do is grab a cup of coffee. Let's talk about what happens if the first thing that I'm reaching for is coffee. And don't get me wrong, I love coffee. I look forward to my morning coffee the night before. I am not kidding you. So, and I will drink it black. I love coffee. Good coffee, I should say. So if I'm drinking coffee first thing in the morning, before anything else happens, I'm dehydrating myself because it's a natural diuretic, right? It's going to flush water from our bodies. I'm typically causing some sort of mineral imbalance first thing in the morning because guess what? I have not given my body anything to work with. I'm giving my body a stimulant. So your adrenal glands, they sit right above your kidneys, and this is, part of your adrenaline, that word is in there. And this is a stimulant. This stimulates your body several ways. We won't get into the breakdown of dilation of blood vessels, all that stuff. But, it hypes you up. I'm going to use that. That's a good term, right? It hypes you up. It gets you ready. That fight or flight kicks in, and it makes you alert and you are ready, right? However, what it has not done is fueled you. So coffee is actually not fuel. It's a stimulant, which is why you feel good, and people have said, coffee is a drug, which it is in many ways. Your body can literally become addicted to it, and it does. And I'm not here to bash coffee. I'm having my coffee. This is your decision to make for yourself. But I'm getting to a point. So as you are drinking this coffee, you're flushing your body of minerals. You're flushing your body of hydration, right? It is dehydrating you, literally. And on top of that is flushing minerals from your system that do a host of other processes in your body. especially helping being those spark plugs. And I always think of minerals and enzymes as working together and them being like spark plugs to cause other reactions to happen in your body that need to happen. And when you're deficient in these things, it'll show up in very minuscule ways that you may not even notice most of the time. Dehydration is one of them. Even when you're drinking water, you can be dehydrated if you're flushing minerals out of your body that it is not, obtaining through your food and things like that. So this is when people talk about intermittent fasting and they talk about skipping breakfast and things like that, where it can be problematic because this will literally mess with your hormones. So as we're drinking that coffee, we also know that coffee is an appetite suppressant, right? So you're not going to feel hungry. You will actually experience a jitteriness before you experience a hunger pain because now you have actually diminished your sensitivity to that hunger cue. And you essentially are ignoring it because it is basically being covered up by this stimulant, this diuretic, and all of those things. So this is important to note. So when people talk about, I did intermittent fasting or I did, I'll get into the other ones. And I wake up and the first thing that I have is coffee. It's so important to hydrate yourself, right? I like to take my water, I sprinkle in real salt, which is Redmond real salt. And it has so many minerals in it to replenish the minerals that I probably lost overnight. Most of us wake up in the middle of the night. You have to use the restroom. Again, if you're eating right now, you might want to listen to this at a different time. So, you use the restroom. So the body is very interesting because it constantly needs input and constantly has output, and it is constantly trying to maintain homeostasis and a balance. And that is where insulin comes in. It is trying to create this balance of blood sugar, this balance of energy. So when we are doing things like starving ourselves, or we're forcing ourselves to use something else for energy, when we don't have a health concern that is actually saying, let's try using this keto thing, or let's try doing this to get to a more balanced place because the body is no longer sensitive in the ways that it needs to. So let's try this dietary approach to get our body back to a place of homeostasis, to get our body back to a place of health and wellness so that it can process the things that are coming into it in the way that God created it to. So I'm telling you about coffee right now because I feel like a lot of people can probably relate to that. There are some other things that we can talk about. So the next thing would be if you are eating a carbohydrate with nothing else with it. When we're not eating a balanced meal, and by balanced, I don't mean you had something green and I don't mean balanced as in visually balanced or things that are marketed as being balanced. I mean balanced in the sense that you are not having you're not solely having carbohydrates, right? When people have diabetes and they try to get sugar into their blood quickly, they will do things that will go straight into the bloodstream, which is a strong carbohydrate, usually through fructose. So something like just straight orange juice, not in a shake or anything, just orange juice. And you're not eating an orange, you're drinking the juice. You're getting a concentrated form of fructose that the body is going to get into the bloodstream immediately. And this is something that people do to regulate, since their body's not naturally regulating that, to regulate their blood sugar, right? So we have all encountered or heard about sugar regulation, whether or not we've ever thought about it or not. Your body is doing the same thing. Our bodies are constantly trying to have the right amount of glucose in the cell, which is what the pancreatic, hormone insulin is trying to do. It is trying to have the right amount of quote unquote sugar. When I say glucose, sugar, I'm going to use those interchangeably in the bloodstream so that we can do the functions and have the fuel that our body needs to do the different processes. Our brain, everything in our body is running off glucose. So if we're eating something that is not balanced, so say instead of just having the orange juice, you could have an orange. What's changed? One, you're not getting a concentrated form of sugar that's going to go directly into your bloodstream. You're getting fiber, you're getting some phytonutrients in there, and you're actually giving your body something that it has to digest a little slower. Still very fast, but a little slower. So it's the reason why a lot of people that, have type 2 diabetes are told, to watch their sugar intake, to eat lower carbohydrates, because we just learned carbohydrates turn into glucose and the body is using that for energy. And if the body is not working well, aka you're resistant to insulin, now type 2 diabetes, that's what it is. You're insulin resistant. Your body is no longer using the glucose in a way that it should be. It's so desensitized to how much sugar you are taking in your diet that it is no longer working properly. So now people have to do things like watch how much carbohydrates they take in. But this is relevant to every single last one of us because our bodies all use the same thing for energy, glucose. If we are skipping meals, we're actually going to feel what this feels like. So if you've ever skipped a meal or gone a long time without a meal, you will feel insulin's effects. You will feel shaky and jittery. You may have a horrible headache. You may feel dizzy. You may have a really bad migraine. You may experience, different hormonal things in your body, like how hot you feel or how cold you feel. It may cause flushing in some people when this is not regulated well. So it's not just people that have type 2 diabetes that have to think about eating balanced. It is every part of the population. I was just sharing recently with someone about my son. And when we were vegan the first 2 years of his life. And I noticed something without even being able to really articulate what it was. When I say I've been on a health journey for over a decade, maybe 2 at this point, of really trying to learn based on the evidence from our bodies and our body's responses, how our body is regulating the things that we're taking in and if it is. One of the things that I learned from him, just watching him eat, little kid, you're very conscious of what your kid is eating because you're constantly feeding them, So I learned about dairy and him having that dairy allergy when he was a baby, and we haven't had cow's dairy for going on 7 years because of his horrible reaction to it, because I was nursing him. And what else I learned by watching my son eat was his stomach was really puffy. He had a lot of GI issues, and we ate, quote unquote, healthy. To look back, I would give him this oat bar first thing in the morning. I won't name any brands, but it had really so-called good ingredients. And on the front of the package, it said 12 grams of whole grain. And I was like, okay, yay. And I would give him this for breakfast every morning. It was quick. It was easy. I didn't have to cook anything. And it was something that was a staple in our home. We even ate it for snacks sometimes too. So I would give him this bar for breakfast. It was this apple cinnamon oat bar, something or another. Oh, you live and you learn, right? So I look back and I think, I can't believe I was starting my son's day like that. Let me tell you the ingredients. When we look at the marketing claims on the front are, in my opinion, yes, you want to hype up the good things about a product. Sure, I get it. But we also need to recognize that when we turn over the back of the package, the things that are really, really important need to stick out to us way more than the quote unquote claim. Who told us eating 12 grams of whole grain was good? No one. It's just a claim so we can ignore the things that we should really be focused on. And those things are how much sugar is in this product. I mean added sugars, but I also mean carbohydrates because again, carbohydrates turn into glucose to be sent into the cell, right? That's what the whole pancreas insulin hormone is doing. And if we are getting too much at one sitting, what does that do? Just like that straight orange juice that you give someone who is having an issue with their sugar regulation to get a whole bunch of sugar into their body at one time to manage their response. This is when it gets interesting. So when I turn it over, you look at it, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you how many teaspoons of sugar. So a teaspoon of sugar has 4 grams, right? And you're looking at this and you're thinking, wow, this has this many carbohydrates and it'll also say this many added sugars. I was giving my son the equivalent of 10 teaspoons, 9.5 to be exact, but 10 teaspoons of sugar first thing in the morning. Okay, let's think about this for a second. I'm talking to myself. I was like, I can't believe I'm giving him this. So you're giving him this one macronutrient, just carbs, straight carbs. He's not about to go and run a marathon. He doesn't need this much sugar. For whatever your body cannot use in that moment, it is going to store, right? Insulin is also a storage hormone. It's the reason why people that have type 2 diabetes usually have a larger trunk. So the stomach, the midsection is usually a little bigger because visceral fat actually builds around the organs because insulin also tells the body to store fat because sugar that cannot be used gets stored and it gets turned into fat, right? So when people are like, fat makes you fat, actually, fat is really good at regulating your hormones. Insulin is really, sugar is really good at telling insulin to regulate your fat and store more if it can't use it. So I'm giving my son 9.5 to 10 teaspoons of sugar every morning, just in this little healthy little bar. Yes, the ingredients were quote unquote clean, but as I look back on it, it had so many different sugars within it. This is just from memory because this was so many years ago, but I believe it had malt syrup sugar. It had barley malt syrup sugar. You might see things like raisin juice or fruit juice or apple juice sugar. It also had the oats, which we know carbohydrates get turned into glucose, which is a form of sugar. And it also had apple pieces in it, dried apples, sugar. So I was literally giving my kid a sugar bomb every morning, and I was wondering why his stomach was bloated and he was always hungry. He was also irritable and agitated. He couldn't talk yet. He said a couple of words because he had a couple of teeth. He was at that age, kind of toddling around, eating solid food, saying, a few words. And it did not occur to me. So when we are doing things that we think are healthy, like eating a pack of crackers or just having our coffee in the morning and skipping that, what we are doing is literally setting our blood sugar regulation up for that day in such a bad place. We get literally started on the wrong, we're on the wrong playing field first thing in the morning, and we can set our bodies up to have really interesting consequences and interesting symptoms that we may not even recognize as this thing being caused by what we're eating and not regulating our blood sugar. So what can we do to manage our blood sugar better? What can we do immediately? The first thing that I would encourage you to do is hydrate in the morning. You can put a little bit, I'll link the hydration episode. Me and my husband have been doing it for months and months now, now that we know. You know better, you do better, right? And then having something to eat either with or before our coffee. So I don't know what that may be for you, but I would encourage you to eat a balanced meal. Eggs are amazing. Sometimes I can eat them, sometimes I can't. We'll get into that in another episode too. I'm just giving you a lot of previews of what I'll be talking about over the next couple of weeks. And I'm also reminding myself too, because there's just so many different things that I could share with you, but I want to try to stay focused in this area because it affects us all so much. So balancing our meals, that can look like making sure that we're not having carbs just by themselves, because that is going to affect our hormones literally. And it is also going to affect how we even think, how well we are able to think, how clear-headed we are able to be. If you start your day with something that has a protein and a fat, and I don't mean 2 grams of protein, I don't mean 6 grams of protein. Most adults need about, 20 to 27 grams of protein at each meal. And this is one of those numbers that I've pulled from my own experience, and also from the amount of carbohydrates that I'll have at a meal. I want to make sure that I'm not having way more grams of carbohydrates than I am of protein. And say, a slice of bread, for example, is going to run you anywhere from like 10, depending on what it is, 10 to 20 grams of carbohydrates. So that's kind of where I get that number from, in case you're wondering. This is not a rule of thumb to follow for you. You have to find out what works for you, and I want to encourage you to do that. But I also want to encourage you to eat balanced so that your blood sugar is balanced. Balanced blood sugar means sustained energy. Sustained and maintained energy, and you don't have these huge rises and falls, because those feelings that we feel of feeling, oh my gosh, I got to eat something right now, I am shaking. Many times that is because our body is not fueled, and we've set ourselves back, and our body is trying to catch up with the energy expenditure that is happening, because it won't be sustained energy if we're just eating something very sugary. Your body is gonna go into your bloodstream almost immediately. If you're eating something that has a little bit of fiber, it'll take a little bit longer, maybe 30 minutes or so. But most of our digestion starts in our mouth, right? And if most of our food can be broken down in our mouth when we're talking about carbohydrates, imagine how quickly that is going to get into the bloodstream, because the body doesn't have to do much more as far as digesting it. So if you're not eating something that has a protein, which takes your body significantly longer to break those amino acids down than it does to just these simple sugars. It is very simple for your body to break down sugars. And we start at carbohydrates. And when we start talking about simple carbohydrates, that's exactly what we mean. It's simple. It's not complex. Our body doesn't really have to work very hard to get that directly into the bloodstream. So if you are starting your day with something like coffee and a muffin, wow, you are literally jacking your sugar first thing in the morning, depleting your minerals first thing in the morning. And, if they're not being replenished, and you're also messing with your hunger cue, the hormone, because you're drinking something that is literally suppressing your appetite. So when you start getting these headaches, or you start feeling gassy, or you start feeling bad, a lot of times it is because your body is not getting the energy that it needs in a sustained way, and your blood sugar is not being regulated. This affects every single last one of us. If you give kids some candy, you see they bounce off the walls, and then later on, they're agitated, they can't calm down, they're irritable. Guess what? This happens to us too, but since we're on the move or doing different things, we don't notice it as much as we do in a small child. That the same thing is true for us. Their metabolism obviously is a lot faster, because they're going through a whole lot of growth and growth spurts and things like that. But the same is true for us adults. If we are just having food that is unbalanced and, just laden with carbohydrates that our body can't even use, And women are like, oh, let's get fat free. Let's get fat free. I remember this was preached to women for so many years in marketing. It was like, get it fat free. And I know if you are around my age, you know what I'm talking about. Everything came out that was fat free. It was like, I can't believe it's not this. And, this cooking spray that had like 0 calories, which is bogus. They can say it has 0 calories as long as it has less than 4 grams. Anyways. For a 1-second spray. Don't get me started on that. We had things like Slim Fast. It was like, have this for breakfast and then another one for lunch and then a healthy dinner. It's like we spent decades jacking up our insulin sensitivity, jacking up our sugar regulation and our hunger hormones because, all of these pills came on the market. It was like green tea extract. Guess what that is? It's caffeine. It's straight caffeine. It's concentrated caffeine. So, you get jittery. Oh, I feel so energized. No. You're running on stress hormones and you are jacked up from the stimulant that is caffeine. Okay. So we have been told so many different things about what it means to quote unquote eat healthy. Oh, eat a giant salad, but then pour all of this fat-free dressing on your salad. Then we came in with pour all this sugar-free dressing on your salad. And we have been sold so much sugar because when they took fat out, they added sugar. And then when they took out the sugar, they added more chemicals that are so stinking brand new that we don't even know what they do yet. We literally don't. We found out about aspartame, which was, the blue packet. But, we have just been following more so along with marketing and for just habits that we have in our lives of the way that we eat. And many times it's what we eat, yes, but it's also the way that we eat. And I don't think many of us were taught that. I believe that we jumped on different trends and different bandwagons because, we heard someone had a good result. But a lot of times the science was nowhere to be found within that. Like the physiology, how does the body work? What does the body use for energy and all of those things? We're just told sugar is bad. No. We're literally not looking at the whole picture so that company can sell a product. Sugar has a place. You get what I'm saying? So, or we're told meat is bad. Guess what? There are things that we get from meat that we cannot get anywhere else. They cannot synthesize it in a lab. You know what I mean? B12 that comes from plants is completely different than the B12 that is in just naturally in the animal flesh that we eat. We're told fat is bad. No. Actually, we need fat. We need a certain amount of cholesterol so that our body can regulate hormones. We need fat for the fat soluble vitamins that our bodies literally cannot use and obtain the vitamins from without some sort of fat being present. Vitamin A being one of those things, not our body. And guess what? When you eat something that is found in nature, we're eating the whole thing. So when you eat an apple, you're eating the skin, you're eating the quote unquote flesh of that apple. And guess what else you're getting in there? You're getting fiber, you're getting soluble and insoluble fiber, you're getting sugar through the form of fructose. You're also getting some phytonutrients and a couple of antioxidants, not even talking about the vitamin C that you're getting and some of the minerals that are naturally in that apple. So when we're doing things like concentrating things down to just a juice or concentrating things down to its simplest form, we're giving our body less work to do. And with less work to do comes a concentrated material that we're putting into our body. And our body is going to do what our body knows to do. So our bodies are not reading labels and nutrition facts. We are. And when we are not looking at the whole picture that, hey, this thing that I was giving my son for breakfast every morning was the equivalent of sitting my kid down to 9.5 teaspoons of sugar. Wow. It gives a whole different perspective. And I remember going back to that example and just talking about eating more balanced. As a vegan, when I was vegan, it was so hard to do that. You had to be so thoughtful about everything that you ate, and, trying to get in B12, and I'd get a little spray bottle that I would spray sublingually underneath my tongue for B12 to get that quote unquote energy, because B12 is amazing for energy. And it would have you'd look at the nutrition facts and it would say one spray has 1,000% of B12. And this is not a fat soluble vitamin, which means your body can wash it right out of its system. So a lot of supplements that we take and a lot of different things that we're doing, if it's not in its natural form, the body, it doesn't really stick around very long. And many times before our body can utilize it, we just use the restroom. And, people say that sometimes when you take supplements, if your body doesn't need it or can't use it, it's like buying expensive. It's like expensive pee, because your body is flushing it right through. So eating things the way that they're found in nature is a big deal. Eating whole foods is what I'm referring to, because the body has more work to do. And that is the way that God created that food. Don't get me wrong. I love convenience. Trust me. I really, really do. I love convenience. I love, making things easier in the kitchen. But I also love that God made food in a certain way that we should never lose the respect for it. We should never lose the respect of how God created something. And we're not outsmarting what God has done in the nature that he created and the things that he created for us to thrive on. In the Garden of Eden, he made all the stuff first that we would need to sustain our lives. And well, he sustains our life, but you get what I'm saying, our physical bodies. So we are, we're so disconnected from food and what it is. And we have been marketed to for so long about what means health or what is healthy. And I've said this before, we have to do so much unlearning. We have to do so much unlearning and starting to ask the right questions. And it's like, one of the ones that I say is who told me that? Who told me eating 12 grams, I'm just using this for an example. Who told me that 12 grams of carbohydrates were what I needed right now? Who told me that? Our body, if we can start getting a little bit more in tune with what makes us feel good, what makes us sleep well, we can test how our diet is affecting our lives, because it is, by how we feel, by having a baseline of what's normal for us and then trying to get to a place of what's optimal for us, what makes us feel our best, right? Not just what makes us feel okay, not what's just getting us through the day. Most of us are already at that place. We're already there. And we don't know to do different because we've never, a lot of us have never been shown that, because the people before us weren't taught that. But we are literally in the information age where we can Google whatever we want. And yes, you're going to have to kind of go through some information and apply some stuff, and never leave common sense out of the picture. If someone tells you that you can get everything you need from this green pill, that's kind of but did God make that green pill? Was seriously. And we need to start combining science, what we understand and what we have found, the hypotheses that have been tested, the different things that we've learned about the human anatomy and the human body. And then not just that, then we need to couple our common sense. Is this actually a food, or is this something that was made in a lab? Is this something ultra processed? Is this food even alive to give my body what it needs? Or is this something man-made that on the nutrition facts tells me that it has everything that I need in it? Is this a whole food, or is this an ultra processed food? Then it is experience. What is your body and the symptoms and responses that our body is giving us through the different things that we may be ignoring, but our body is giving us and sounding off all these alarms. And we need to know what is normal, what's not normal for us, and what's normal and what's not normal in general. So I just want to encourage you with looking at food as the fuel that God created it to be. And I truly believe that food can be medicine. and food is medicinal, especially when it is the thing that is giving our bodies and our cells what it needs, from the point of glucose to the point of fats to the point of proteins. Like, is our body getting everything that it needs? Are we fueling ourselves? Are we setting ourselves up for success in the morning physically? Because guess what? This body that we're walking around in, we need it to do everything we need to do, right? And if we are not fueling it and we're treating it like some second-class citizen, and we're the last people to eat, and we are just grabbing some coffee on the go. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you're on the go and it's better to eat something than nothing, in my opinion. But we can make eating healthy convenient if we really want to. If we want something, we can work towards it. And I want to really help you in how to get there. I'm not a doctor. I'm sure I put a disclaimer at the beginning of this podcast, but it's important to know your baseline. It's important to know how your body feels and how well you can be. I want you to be well. I want to be well on all of there's certain things we cannot help. I get it. But to the things that we can help, I truly believe that we should. I'm a foodie. I love food. I'm thankful for food. I do like a little happy dance when food is put in front of me. So does my kid. My husband's like, I got to eat again. This is inconvenient. I just don't understand him. I just don't. Not in that way. But, enjoy food. God created food for us to enjoy. I remember my husband saying this one day, and he was like, when Jesus said, the next time I'll eat this with you, it'll be in heaven. And my husband was like, I realized that we're going to eat in heaven. And I know it's really simple and it may sound silly, but, I read scripture and I'm like, yeah, Jesus was, roasting some fish when the disciples were coming to shore, after the resurrection. And it's like, Jesus was like, come on, let's eat, and just really, our physical bodies, God did not ignore that. When Jesus fed the 5,000, he didn't ignore their need for sustenance, for food, so that they wouldn't become weary on the way. When the disciples were like, what are we going to feed all these people? And Jesus is like, see who has anything. And they find the little boy, and I'm pretty sure the rest of that. So God cares about our food. He cares about our bodies. He cares about what we put into this body. I truly believe he does. And I don't believe we're good or bad people to, if we're eating or not eating. But I do believe that God wants us to enjoy the things that he's created. And we find these ways to kind of remove all the goodness about a lot of the food that God created, and we turn it into something that is packaged for sale, which isn't wrong, but we turn it into things that are ultra processed, in companies that don't necessarily care about your health and your wellness or your well-being. They just want to make a buck. And many of the things we can take back into our own hands. I learned this when I was in high school, and I'll never forget it. I went to a high school for marketing, and I also, went to college for business and marketing. And one of the things that you learn is you vote with your dollars. When I remember when we were vegan years and years ago, there were things I had to make from scratch because you couldn't find it, or you had to go to a health food store to get it. And things like almond milk. I remember making my own almond milk from scratch. Like, this is circa 2008, in 2009, I started making stuff from scratch because I was like, oh, well, I'm having issues with dairy. But my body was telling me for a long time, like, this is not good for you. I started making those things, but it was when the demand increased that the supply increased, and we vote with our dollars. We tell companies what to make more of and what to make less of. And the more that, I remember when we first started eating, trying to eat everything organic, because I started learning about all the pesticides and all the things used in our food, and all of the GMOs and all of that stuff, and trying to buy organic stuff. It was so stinking expensive. Some of it still is, but it is so much more readily available than it was 5 years ago when I was just trying to eat more organic food and trying to feed my family more organic food. And now you can go to places like Aldi, and if you haven't checked out any of the videos that I've done on the YouTube channel, Style and Stewardship, I share grocery hauls and I share the prices of the things that I get because I want to encourage you to see how accessible it is or how accessible you can make it to eat healthy, whole foods so that your body can thrive and so that you can feel well and be well. And I'm so passionate about, looking at ingredients and at least knowing what we're putting into our bodies. But we also have forgotten how to eat, and eating things like, they would sit down to, the old timers, I think would call it square meals or whatever. But, you would have, something like some sort of protein, and you would have some sort of carbohydrate. You would typically have some sort of vegetable. And we've gotten to the fast food era where we think a square meal is if my burger comes with fries. And then I'm going to make it a little healthier because I'm going to get a sugar-free or diet drink. Like, how is that? That's snacks. Those are snacks. And if you look at it, there are more carbohydrates in those meals and processed. Like, if you just look at the ingredients on some of the buns that we're putting our burger on, don't even get me started with all of that. You are going to get so much more if you made that burger at home. Literally, because you know what's in there to the best of your ability. And it's not a part of, we'll save that one for another episode. But I just wanted to encourage you to think about how you're regulating or how your body is regulating blood sugar by eating things that are more balanced. So one of the things that I did with my son when we were, still vegan and all of that stuff, I started giving him less of that oat bar thing that I was giving him. And I started actually pairing like raw cashews with it. And I would start making him a protein shake with it, where I would, sneak in some things like, hemp seeds and all of those things, and still not putting too much sugar in those. So I would put something that was less on the glycemic index, something like blueberries for the antioxidants and all of those things. And I'd sneak like spinach in there and different things. He got to the point where he was like, I'm not drinking this. And I had a whole different scenario, and veganism was just not sustainable and it was not healthy for us. And I just wanted to share kind of I wanted to share my perspective, but I also wanted to share what science says about how our body, gets energy into the cell through glucose and through that pancreatic hormone insulin, and how that works to regulate our body's use of those, those things that we're taking in, of those carbohydrates. That's why eating things like complex carbohydrates, you're giving your body something to break down. It's not a simple sugar. Your body's getting fiber, both soluble and insoluble fiber. That's going to slow digestion, which means that when you slow digestion, you are going to slow how quickly that sugar is going to get into your blood. When I say sugar, glucose, I'm using them interchangeably. And when you add something like fat, you're slowing it down even more. And when you have something like a protein, you are slowing it down even more, which equals sustained energy, regulated blood sugar, balanced energy for the day until your next meal. So I hope all of this was informative, encouraging. Maybe I'm just reminding you of something you already know. Maybe I'm confirming something you've been thinking about. Maybe we're just pointing out some areas that we may want to look at more, to be more cognizant of, and to really get to a place where we understand what works well for our bodies, what it means to eat balanced and whole, so that we can feel well and so that we can be well because we want to do well. So until next time, your life matters. What you do with it matters. So what will you steward well?